Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today is Jeanie Nelson of Votes for Women. We're celebrating the 100th anniversary of women getting the suffrage right here in Tennessee. Tennessee was the final vote to give approval to the 19th Amendment. Jeanie, let's talk a little bit about the history that occurred a century ago. 35 of 36 states had approved the amendment. Tennessee, in some ways, did not look promising. The South itself did not approve a lot of this. Is it possible that if Tennessee had not approved this, it might have never happened or might not have happened for many months or years later?
Absolutely. By this time, things had stalled, and you'll be able to see in the room in vivid form all the states that had said yes and all the states that had said no. And it really came down to, right at the end, came down to North Carolina and Tennessee. And actually, the day before Tennessee took their vote, North Carolina their governor decided not to call a special election. So before the upcoming presidential campaign, it was, many would say, totally impossible to get another state. And, you think about it, if you look at the southern states, the vast majority of them had said no. It took till 1983 eventually for Mississippi to actually pass a bill saying yes, although, of course, the federal amendment allowed women to vote there.
The lobbying on all this was intense. Everybody was pretty much headquartered at the Hermitage Hotel, which is still there today, now a 5-star hotel right across from the Capitol. One of the authors who wrote about this called it a battle of bribes, bigotry, bourbon, and the Bible. And we were supposed to be a dry state at the time, but those lawmakers who were amenable about how they might vote could get lots to drink down at the Hermitage at that time, right?
Absolutely. There was a suite on the 8th floor called the Jack Daniel's suite, and there was intense lobbying. The corporate interests and were strong, and you have to think about it. They were really worried about the unpredictability of women's votes. I mean, they had no idea, and of course they were worried. The liquor industry was worried that if women got the right to vote, they would never be able to get rid of prohibition. The railroads were very concerned. The manufacturers could see women coming in and putting in all kinds of child labor restrictions, hour restrictions, pay. So there was a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of very serious lobbying. And of course, there were the religious issues that people did not think that, or many denominations did not feel that women should be either outside the home or all kinds of different aspects to that.
Tennessee did have limited suffrage for women already, and the state Senate ratified it fairly quickly. The House was a whole different story. The House Speaker vote flipped in the last couple of days from a yes vote to a no vote. He tried to table the measure. It came down to one vote, with a House member, Harry Byrne, changing his vote from no to yes because he got a letter from his mother. Tell about that story.
Yes, it really is one of the most dramatic, heartwarming stories at the same time. But you gave a great synopsis of the actual tabling and what occurred that day. But you have to picture the scene of all of these women who come in from all over the country to lobby for and against, and people from all over the state lobbying for and against. And it was a gripping, dramatic time up there at the legislature, with people looking down from the balconies, of course. And so they didn't know. I mean, Harry Byrne, this the by one vote, he's become a hero. Although we have to remember Banks Turner. Without him, it would never have happened to, but he just didn't happen to have a letter from his mother to put him in history books in the same way he should be remembered. However, they got in the vote, they started down the vote, and they got to Byrne, and he had on a red rose, which meant he was anti-suffrage, but he took that off and he changed to the yellow vote. And it was because of a letter he had received just right close to that time, that from his mother saying basically, do the right thing, remember the ladies, and do what your mom would want you to do. The language, the precise language, is absolutely fantastic. Of course, it's written in a 7-page letter that talks about all kinds of regular day-to-day things. And Harry Byrne had been, his mentor was totally against women getting the right to vote. He was under unbelievable pressure. Here's a guy, the youngest person in our state legislature, 24 years old, from Niota, Tennessee.
And when the final vote was announced, almost pandemonium broke loose in the chamber, and we had the signature moment of that time. The state capitol, from the gallery of the State House, there was literally rain of yellow flowers, yellow roses coming down from above.
Yes, absolutely. Just, but I think people were shocked. You know, I mean, there was, and in fact, Pat, most of the Nashville delegation had flipped from being for suffrage to being against suffrage. So that's just one indication of the scene that was unfolding there.
Now, throughout the country, suffragists were waiting for this to happen, to see what's going to happen. They already had planned to start ringing bells all over the country the minute they found out. They did that. But for some reason, maybe Nashville was too busy trying to make sure it got passed here in Tennessee. There was no bells ringing going on in Nashville or across the state. You're trying to do something about that 100 years later.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it was. The newspapers had ads that said, "Don't. This is not a jubilation. This is not something to." I had a great quote in front of me a minute ago, but it's not something to celebrate. This is against the principles of states' rights and all the principles that we believe in. And so it was too raw, too controversial. Chattanooga paper, Knoxville paper, they all had something against. So Tennessee was silent to mute, and we're trying to fix that at noon on August the 18th, 100 years later.
Let's take a break. Jeanie Nelson's our guest. We're talking about the celebration of the 100 years of women's suffrage, women's vote. And we'll ring the bell right there, back after this break.